After centuries of conquest, the Roman Republic stood as the most powerful state in the Mediterranean. Its armies had crushed Carthage, conquered Greece, and claimed new lands stretching from Spain to Asia Minor. But with great power came even greater corruption. The values that once built Rome, duty, equality, and sacrifice, began to fade, replaced by greed, ambition, and political chaos. The victory over Carthage made Rome rich beyond imagination. Gold, slaves, and land poured into the Republic. But the rewards of empire were not shared equally. The patrician elite, the old noble families, seized the spoils, buying up vast estates known as latifundia, worked by thousands of slaves captured in war. Meanwhile, small farmers, the backbone of Rome's legions, were ruined. They couldn't compete with cheap slave labor. They lost their lands, their homes, and their voices in the Senate. Many drifted into the cities, poor and desperate, living off state grain handouts. Rome had become a city of wealth and poverty, luxury and hunger. For the first time, cracks began to form in the Republic's foundation. The Senate, dominated by aristocrats, ignored the suffering of the people. But not everyone stayed silent. Around 133 BCE, a young tribune named Tiberius Gracchus emerged as a voice of reform. He was a member of a noble family but deeply moved by the suffering he saw. Tiberius proposed a simple idea: the rich should return a portion of public land to the poor citizens who needed it most. It wasn't revolutionary, it was supposed to restore balance. But to the Senate, it was an attack on their wealth and power. The reform divided Rome. The people adored Tiberius, but the elite saw him as a threat. When he ran for re-election as tribune, something unheard of, the Senate accused him of tyranny. On election day, chaos erupted. Senators and their supporters stormed the forum, armed with clubs and stones. Tiberius Gracchus was beaten to death, along with hundreds of his followers. It was the first time in centuries that political violence spilled into the streets of Rome. The message was clear: reform would be met with blood. But the movement didn't die. 10 years later, Tiberius's younger brother, Gaius Gracchus, took up the cause. He was even more determined and far more radical. Gaius introduced sweeping reforms, subsidized grain for the poor, new colonies to resettle citizens, and changes in the judicial system to weaken the Senate's control. For a time, it seemed like he might succeed. But Rome's ruling class fought back again. Political rivals turned the people against him, accusing Gaius of treason. Surrounded on a hill by government forces, Gaius ordered a slave to kill him before he could be captured. Thousands of his supporters were executed. The deaths of the Gracchus brothers marked the beginning of the end for the Republic. Violence had become politics. The old system, based on debate and law, was giving way to bloodshed and intimidation. In the years that followed, the Republic spiraled deeper into chaos. Generals, not senators, became the true power in Rome. Men like Gaius Marius, a brilliant but ruthless soldier, rose to dominance. Marius reformed the army, allowing the poor to enlist for pay and the promise of land. His reforms saved Rome's military, but they also changed its loyalty. Soldiers no longer fought for the Republic. They fought for their general. With this, Rome's legions became personal armies. Whoever controlled the soldiers controlled the state. Soon, rival generals began turning their forces against one another. Marius clashed with another ambitious commander, Lucius Cornelius Sulla. Their conflict erupted into Rome's first full-scale civil war. In 88 BCE, Sulla marched his army on Rome, something no Roman general had ever dared to do. The city was taken by force, and thousands of political enemies were executed. For the first time, the Republic itself had been conquered by its own army. Sulla ruled as a dictator, rewriting the constitution to strengthen the Senate and weaken the people's assemblies. He claimed it was to restore order, but the damage was already done. When he died, power fell back into chaos. Amid this turmoil, a new generation of ambitious men rose to fill the void. Pompey, a young and skilled general. Crassus, the richest man in Rome. And above them all, one name began to dominate history: Gaius Julius Caesar. Caesar was born into a patrician family but was known for his charm, intelligence, and boldness. He was a master politician, building alliances through favors, debts, and charisma. Together with Pompey and Crassus, he formed a secret political alliance known as the First Triumvirate, a deal to control Rome from behind the scenes. Each brought something to the table. Crassus brought money, Pompey brought military power, and Caesar brought popularity. To strengthen his position, Caesar sought military glory. He was appointed governor of Gaul, modern-day France, and over the next decade, he waged one of the most brutal and successful campaigns in history. His conquest expanded Rome's borders all the way to the English Channel. He became a legend, adored by his soldiers and feared by his enemies. But success in Gaul made Caesar too powerful. The Senate, led by Pompey, demanded he return to Rome and disband his army. Caesar knew what that meant. Without his army, he'd be prosecuted, maybe executed. So, in 49 BCE, he made a choice that would change history forever. He led his legions across the Rubicon River, declaring, "The die is cast." Crossing the Rubicon was an act of war. It was the moment the Republic truly died. Civil war erupted once again, Caesar versus Pompey, friend versus friend, Roman versus Roman. Caesar's forces moved swiftly, defeating Pompey's armies across Italy, Spain, and finally at the decisive Battle of Pharsalus in Greece. Pompey fled to Egypt, where he was assassinated on arrival. Caesar returned to Rome as its undisputed ruler. The Senate made him dictator, first temporarily, then for 10 years, and finally, for life. The Republic, the system that had endured for nearly 5 centuries, was now in the hands of a single man. But power breeds fear. Many senators believed Caesar wanted to make himself king, a title Romans despised since the days of their first monarchy. Conspiracies began to form. On the Ides of March, 44 BCE, Caesar entered the Senate house, surrounded by men he thought were his allies. Moments later, daggers flashed. Caesar fell, stabbed 23 times by his own senators, including his close friend Brutus. His last words, according to legend, were "Et tu, brute?" The Republic cheered, believing freedom was restored. But they were wrong. Caesar's death didn't save the Republic, it destroyed it completely. Rome plunged into yet another series of civil wars. His allies, including Mark Antony and his adopted heir Octavian, would soon battle for control of the world's greatest empire. The dream of a free republic was gone. In its place, the foundations of an empire were forming, an empire that would be ruled not by the Senate, but by emperors. In the next episode, we'll see how Octavian, later known as Augustus, rose from the chaos of Caesar's death to become the first emperor of Rome, ending the Republic forever and beginning the age of imperial power.